Hello, everyone. I'm Mystery.
And I'm not more by the Authenticator, and we are the Duality of Man.
Today, we're going to talk about politicians and legislations. Some good, some bad, but I think all of this is important considering these are the people who sign laws that affect our lives, even if they themselves are sometimes insulated from the consequences.
Yeah, never forget, folks, that politician should mean a public servant, not a elected aristocrat, like so many of them seem to want it to be the case. But they are meant to serve the polis, i.e., the people who, you know, are essentially the plebs, those people that they have open contempt for 99.9% of the time, and
Al-
confused utopian nonsense for the remaining 1% of the time.
Also, never trust anyone who advocates for a political position that they themselves will not be affected by.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, let's start with the first story. It says Florida Governor Ron DeSantis on Friday signed a measure that will overhaul the state's alimony laws after three vetoes of similar bills and a decade of emotional clashes over the issue. The measure, SB 1416, includes doing away with what is known as permanent alimony. This is an absolutely fantastic move.
Chad, yes. Ron DeSantis, the men's rights advocate, apparently.
It never made sense to me at all why you have to pay for the life of someone that you're no longer tied to, especially years and years after you've been separated.
Do you want the real answer? Because the real answer is 9 times out of 10, the person making more money is actually 99 times out of 100, the person making more money is the man, and therefore alimony requires them to take care of women. And because, instinctive gynocentrism, women have inherent sentimental value that men simply do not have. I guarantee you that were it the other way around, were women making the majority of the money, and men were allowed to, milk sentimental money off of them for the remainder of their lives, alimony would be gone in 5 minutes or
I mean,
less.
I could understand maybe a reason in the beginning, like if one party was working and the other wasn't, the other party would like need some time to get on their feet. But there are dudes out here who've been paying alimonies for like 10, 15 years.
And lest we forget, there are people who are forced to pay multiple alimonies because they get married, they get divorced, they get married, they get divorced multiple times, which
I mean,
is which is another issue unto itself. And we've talked about duality of men and relationships 5 ways from Sunday here. But is that truly fair? I ask you. Is it truly fair that a man can be on the hook for uh holding in the lives she's become accustomed to multiple women who he's been with?
absolutely not. I don't even understand the whole life that she's become accustomed to excuse because you're an adult. If your circumstances change, you need to adapt to your current circumstances. You don't get to leech off of somebody else just because well, in most cases, you decide you don't want to be with them anymore. And
Ah,
like,
but the inherent sentimental aristocracy that is the woman card, don't you know?
like, get a job, learn a skill, just find something, and learn to take care of yourself. Like, women want to be respected, but they don't want to be treated like adults after a marriage is dissolved.
Well, because in their heads, it actually would make, and to their credit, some women will actually say this. I don't know to what level I agree or not, but some women will actually say the fact that we expect so much of men is a sign that we should be more lenient on men, and good for those women as far as like that is at least an empathetic position. They there are some people who think that no one should be held to what you or I would probably call an adult standard, and to some degree I can see why those standards are unrealistic and unreasonable in certain circumstances, and we should be more lenient with them. But at the same time, it's like, okay, so you want the world to bend over backwards for you and you to yield to no one. Hmm. Do you see the problem there a little bit?
But there's more to the article, so let's read a bit more. DeSantis' approval came a year after he nixed a similar bill that sought to eliminate permanent alimony and set up a formula for alimony amounts based on the length of marriage. This is a really big change as far as alimony goes, said family law attorney Emily Phillips, adding that this is the largest change to alimony in decades. So, what does this new measure mean for alimony laws in Florida? Here's everything you need to know about this new bill. It says, along with eliminating permanent alimony, the measure will set up a process for ex spouses to make alimony payments to seek modifications to alimony agreements when they want to retire. It allows judges to reduce or terminate alimony, support, or maintenance payments after considering a number of factors such as the age and health of the person who makes the payments, the customary retirement age of that person's occupation, the economic impact or reduction in alimony would have on the recipients of the payments, and the motivation for retirement and likelihood of returning to work for the person making the payments. The bill will set a 5 year limit on what is known as rehabilitative alimony. Under the plan, people married for less than 3 years will not be eligible for alimony payments, and those who've been married for 20 years or longer will be eligible to receive payments for up to 75% of the term of the marriage. So if you're married for 20 years, you can get alimony up to 15 years.
I mean, I can see why that's like that. At the same time, 15 years seems a bit long to me.
Yeah, but it says up to, so it's in most cases it's almost certainly going to be not that high.
Yeah, it's negotiable though, which again, I like the idea of it being negotiable because this is the other thing. Trying to turn something that is an individual by individual thing into a one size fits all standard never helps goddamn anyone. Never. It only serves to bury people in mountains and mountains of bureaucracy. And bureaucracy is very close to being the devil.
Yeah, what I really like is if you're married for 3 years or less, you will not be eligible for alimony payments because I've heard like this from a lot of women who do these things called starter marriages, where they will basically marry a guy that they're not really all that bonded to, but they'll just like see how they feel about
He'll
married
do
life.
for now, basically.
Yeah, they'll see how they feel about married life, and if it doesn't work out, they will divorce him, and then hey, they're eligible for alimony. Not anymore, at least in Florida, anyways.
I mean that used to be what dating was kind of for. Hello, is this thing on? Like that used to be kind of what dating was for. You were with a guy for a couple of years, and then if you felt a long term connection to them, then you popped the question, and then you got married. I really hate this like elimination of the courting process entirely in modern day relationships. It's just like, no, we've been seeing each other for a month, so we get married, and oh look, after 2 years, after the customary, the neurochemicals are starting to wear off, and we're no longer infatuated, instant divorce. Well, gee, maybe if you had waited the customary 2 years for those brain chemicals to wear off, so that you would know how you actually felt about the person underneath all of the dopamine flavored lies, you might have a stronger basis for a relationship there.
I also don't like that, like the idea of family has been taken out of dating because it used to be that the purpose of dating was to get married, which would be the coming together of two families. So whether or not the families got along or your significant other got along with your family was an important factor. And it's
Well,
I
I
think well, here's the thing. I think it's also important because like your family, they're going to care about you and want what's best for you, and oftentimes they will see red flags that you may miss because you are in love with this person, so you may not necessarily see some of their more
Yeah,
toxic
the
qualities.
the
But
aforementioned dopamine flavored lies.
yeah, so I think
That being said, I think it's a law of the universe that everyone hates their in laws. So I don't know if that's a reasonable standard to apply or not.
I honestly think that's just a stereotype because I've seen a lot of people who have gotten along just fine with their in-laws. I think it's just a stereotype at this point.
I think like most stereotypes though, there's more of a kernel of truth in it than would make most people comfortable. Um, because I've seen plenty of people's relationship with their families in my life, and yeah, it seems to be it does seem to at the very least have an anecdotal level of truth that people will inevitably hate their in-laws, and
I,
I don't I don't want to give the families of the person some kind of veto power, because then it might just be, well, I irrationally hate you because some you have some mannerism that pisses me off, therefore you don't get to marry my kid or whatever the fuck.
seriously,
That would be an incredibly stupid standard, I think.
I don't think it would be like a veto power. I think it's more like saying like your family, you know, who cares about you and who are not necessarily blinded by love for this other person could see like some serious issue where they say like, hey, this person isn't good. You need to get out of this relationship.
The other problem though is some families actually are abusive, or just don't there's no love lost between family members. And I I hesitate to give family that much weight, because
Well, obviously, this is a
a lot
situation
of
where your
families can be
family.
extremely petty bitches.
Obviously, this is in situations where your family actually does want the best for you.
Hmm.
But I know everybody's family relationship isn't the best. I mean, there are people in my own family who have difficult familiar relationships, but
Yeah,
I
and
think
I think everyone has moments where their family becomes a personal soap opera, or a personal uh, dark comedy.
yeah, everybody has that moment. I've had that moment with my family, but at least in my situations, those moments never last.
And I am incredibly happy for you that it appears not to last. But there are people who are not so lucky.
All right, now there's been some backlash to this bill. It says the
Probably because
approve
DeSantis proposed it, let's be honest. If nothing else.
let's see.
It could be the most perfect bill under the sun, but if DeSantis proposed it, they would be combing through it with a fine tooth comb for something that could be vaguely construed as evil.
You're gonna laugh at this one. The approval drew outcry from members of the First Wives Advocacy Group, a coalition of mostly older women who receive permanent alimony and who asserted that their lives will be upended without the payments.
So, a bunch of feminist Karens wanting to speak to the manager of the government. Why am I not
Basically,
surprised?
yes. They have built their entire lives around the alimony payments they get from their ex-husband.
Ah, again, because of the inherent sacredness of the woman card, to the point that it actually seemed oppressive to women. If you consider, men don't have that right. Maybe you shouldn't have it either. Then they start spitting venom like freaking Elizabeth Bathory on a period.
That is not an image I needed.
I apologize, but it was palpable in my head, so I had to share it.
They've released a statement. Hold on. On behalf of the thousands of women who our group represents, we are very disappointed in the governor's decision to sign the alimony reform bill. We believe by signing it, he has put older women in a situation which will cause financial devastation. The so-called party of family values has just contributed to erosion of the institution of marriage in Florida. They've contributed to the erosion of the institution of divorce in Florida.
Okay, but here's the other interesting little thing. Are you so gynocentrically and narcissistically obsessed with the woman card that you actually look at this and go, "Wait, you mean I can't get permanent alimony from my husband in the event that we become exes? Then I'm not getting married." Is that the level of narcissism we're dealing with, whereby you have to rig the situation in my favor or I'm not engaging with it? Is that what
But
we're doing?
here's the thing: these are older women who have most likely been divorced for quite a while now. They have had God only knows how long to actually do something with their lives, and yet they've continued to just leech off of this poor bastard.
Because inherent sentimental value of the woman card. We shouldn't have to, don't you know? We are the sacred women. We are goddesses bound to the earth. We don't need no stinking human frailties in our lives.
The article goes on. While it elicited tearful testimony from members of the First Wives group, the measure also spurred impassioned pleas from ex spouses who said they had been forced to work long past the age they wanted to retire because they were on the hook for alimony payments. Michael Buller, chairman of Florida Family Fairness, a group that is pushed for doing away with permanent alimony, praised the approval of the bill. Says Florida Family Fairness is pleased that the Florida legislature and Governor DeSantis have passed a bill that ends permanent alimony and codifies in statute. Sorry, I burped. In statute, the right to retire for existing alimony payers. Buller said in a statement, "Anything that adds clarity and ends permanent alimony is a win for Florida families."
Here's a question. Does alimony ordinarily end with bankruptcy, or are you still on the hook for it?
I don't know. I think it might vary from state to state.
And what about child support? Is that something that can be ended by a financial destitution, basically, or not?
I don't know. Well, here's the thing. I think if you can't make child support payments, don't in many states they actually throw you in prison?
Yes, that's what I was getting to. Because the irony of the fact is, not only can you not get off the hook in most cases with alimony or child support because you're destitute, but the need to pay either alimony, child support, or both, usually both, can make you destitute inadvertently.
Yeah,
So you
absolutely.
can be literally homeless on the street, downing gallons of straw dog every day, and you're still on the hook for alimony and child support.
Like, is that's one thing I've never understood. Like, if somebody is incapable of making the payments, where they are barely surviving and they literally just do not have the money to give, like, what's the point of what's throwing them in jail gonna do? I mean, you're essentially trying to squeeze blood from a stone.
It Well, you see, again, you are making the mistake of thinking in straightforward practical terms. This is a existential and moral thing they're doing. This is them shaming the male human for not living up to his obligations as a man, TM, as a real man.
Well, here's the
It's
thing, though.
basically a way of taking away their man card, more or
Well, here's
less.
the thing. It's not a matter of him having the money and just not doing it. Look, it's completely different where he just does not have the money to give. Like, in prison, it's supposed to be a punishment. You're punishing for someone for just not being capable of doing the thing you're
Yes,
ordering them to do.
not being a real man, TM. Yes, because men who can't do are morally invalid. You see, according to the rules as they are currently laid out.
Like, alimony and child support is always wild to me. And like, I remember the old show, 2.5 Men. Like the character on there, like had to He was forced to live with his brother because he got screwed in child support and alimony, and he literally could not afford to live on his own.
Hmm. And it was the premise of a sitcom because that's supposed to be funny, don't you know?
Yeah, just the absolute destitution and suffering of a man.
Because men are a slave class, and men who can't live up to the obligations of said slave caste are invalid and stripped of their man card and basically rendered as blank male human. That's why I hate the traditionalists too a lot of the time, because they, no matter how apparently red pill the traditionalist might be, they still pull the real man thing, and it fucking floors me. As though that isn't the dead center heart of the goddamn problem, that we only value men when they do, and if they can't comply with their duties, we ignore or cease to even acknowledge that they exist half the frickin' time. Well, meanwhile, women, because of the inherent sentimental value in gynocentrism bullshit, can be paid for into their golden years by a man that they met in their 20s, because women just deserve it, don't you know?
All right, let's talk about another bill, kind of the opposite of this one that it does irreparable harm.
Hmm.
Um, no fault divorce, which was signed into law by I believe Ronald Reagan.
Hmm.
Just that was a massive L for the Republicans.
Again, the power of the woman card.
But yeah, so it's been I believe what 40 or 50 years since that bill was signed, and it's done an extreme amount of damage to our society. And we do now have some people who are looking to overturn it because here's the thing, it's not like we don't know what this has led to. We have the numbers, we have the data, we know what this bill has led to. And a lot of it is really, really bad. Yet, for some reasons, our politicians, despite knowing that the bill has led to a lot of bad results that have negatively impacted the American people and that the disillusion of the family has led to a lot of other bad side effects, are still fighting to keep this on the books because reasons.
Because they think in the abstract and have contempt for the literal. I know I've become a broken record on this point, but it really does seem to be the root of like 80% of these problems. Thinking in the moral or existential abstract instead of looking at things in practical terms always is at the root of these people thinking like goddamn aristocrats, and it always leads to 1,000 years of darkness, metaphorically speaking.
A lot of the arguments I've heard against repealing this is that you're going to take away our right to get divorced. Women will be forced to stay in abusive relationships, and I'm like, no. If you're being abused, one, that's a crime, and
It's a
two,
fault
that's called
divorce.
yes, that is fault. That is someone doing something wrong, and you would absolutely be able to get a divorce.
Well, it's roughly the same rationale, and I use that term as loosely as it can possibly be applied to anything, as the idea of, if we hold rape to the same innocent until proven guilty standard as every other fucking crime in the universe, then crafty men will just pretend, will just convince the jury that they didn't do nothing and carry on abusing people. It's that same logic of, it, if you make fault divorce the only kind of divorce, then crafty men would just trick the system into thinking they didn't do nothing
Well,
and
no,
get away with
okay,
evil things.
all right, that is absolutely ridiculous. If somebody is just able to bluff their way out of a charge, clearly the prosecution did not do their job and get the necessary evidence to get a conviction, which, according to our system of law, means that they should be allowed to go.
Ah, but don't you know the secret conspiracy of the patriarchy that rules over all things secretly?
Speaking of the patriarchy, what is the next meeting?
Yeah, I've never been invited. invited. Maybe I'm too gay, too crippled, and too occult qualify, and maybe you're just too black to qualify for the patriarchy meetings. I don't know, but yeah, I've never got the patriarchy summons in the mail like it's freaking jury duty or something. I
Well,
I
well,
mean, maybe my name just got lost off the mailing list. I don't know.
well. Don't affirmative action is out, so I guess it's too late now.
We can't apply for our patriarchy membership cards apparently. The joke, of course, being that there is no such thing, and it is just as irrational as the fundamentalist Christian satanic conspiracy or the Nazi Jewish conspiracy. By the way, but yeah, in case anyone thought that we were being remotely serious 5 seconds ago.
Another argument that I've seen a lot made is that you know a lot of women were in the past trapped in bad marriages where they experienced abuse, and that's why this law was created and it shouldn't be done. I'm like saying, first of all, past injustices do not is not justification for keeping this law on the books now, especially considering how far society has changed. And now this law is simply doing more harm than good. It's like it's honestly like prohibition. We thought it was going to be a good idea, and then the mob rose up, and now it's actually starting to cause a lot of
Well,
problems.
it was a bad idea just inherently because how dare you prevent people from seeking catharsis through whatever means they try to seek catharsis through. It's like the Jack Thompson we should censor video games because my desensitization towards violence thing. Actually, no, we have the numbers, and the numbers and the data say that video games act as a kind of catharsis for violence, which is why since video games started existing, violence has gone down because people have an outlet. I, I've begun crafting a theory that desensitization is actually good in some ways because it does seem that every time someone fearmongers about you'll be desensitized towards this evil thing if we allow this to stand, usually it just makes people calm the fuck down and seek catharsis in an abstract way instead of doing actual harm to things. So my theory is actually that premise in and of itself is wrong. That desensitization is actually good because if you get desensitized towards something, you get bored with it, and therefore it becomes less compelling, which leads you to do it less. If you're desensitized to violence, you're less violent. If you're desensitized to sex, you you think about sex less, etc., etc. Maybe I'm crazy, but I am slowly gestating that theory that desensitization is good actually.
Hmm. All right, let's go on to another article. Let's see who we. Let's see. This one isn't about a particular bill, but it is about the president and the use of his executive orders, which I personally believe should be removed.
Hey, yeah. I've never seen it used for anything that made any fucking sense or in a constructive way. Even things I agree with, like when Obama did it with gay marriage. Speaking again as a gay guy, I would have much rather waited the extra 20 years until everyone was on the same page with gay marriage than force people who are not on board with gay marriage to become increasingly more entrenched because they think they're being cornered by executive bureaucracy, mostly because de facto they kind of are being backed into a corner by executive bureaucracy instead of instead of doing the smart boil the frog thing where everyone will eventually get to the point where it doesn't fucking matter. Someone forced their way in, and now it's a big freaking deal. And it's the same way with a lot of the social justice movements. Actually, they would do more good, I think, by going away, shutting the fuck up, and waiting 20 years because they if society was allowed to advance, kind of organically, they probably would have won already. instead of making a big deal about it and then again, the best way to win these kind of arguments is to desensitize your target to what they might be fear mongering over. But if you actually give them something worthy of being fear mongered over, you're just going to entrench them deeper into their own radicalization, and it ends up bad.
No, the thing is, the use of executive actions has increased over the varying presidencies. We have this chart here. It says Bush, in his first 100 days, signed 13 executive actions. Obama really jumped up and signed 34 within his first 100 days. Trump signed 39 in his first 100 days, and Biden signed 52. So it just seems like this is just ramping up. Like, the thing
Yeah,
is, like,
go
they're
ahead.
basically using the concept of executive actions to bypass things that they know they're never going to get through Congress.
Well, and part of this is actually the bureaucracy's fault, because part of the reason why this kind of decisive action becomes necessary, whether you agree with it or not, is that the bureaucracy is so unwieldy and overcomplicated that you can't even get sensible things through, let alone things that are particular to your constituency or your electorate's needs.
But here's the thing: like Congress was meant to be the place where these ideas are discussed, and there's discussion, there's back and forth. You help me get this bill through, I'll support yours. The next one you try to get something
Yeah,
through,
one
that.
hand washes the other, as they say.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like it, but that's how things get done. It'd be a lot easier if people just voted on principle and what was best for their constituents, but that's not what happens, unfortunately.
Yeah, we don't live in the world we wish we did. We only live in the world that is.
But here's the thing: even with as bad as Congress is, I don't think it's right for the president to just be able to, sign an order and then the various tendrils of the federal branch go enact it while bypassing Congress.
See, I don't know, because I can see times where decisive action is warranted, but at the same time, as I say, I've never seen it used for anything that made any goddamn sense to use it for. And at the very least, it should be used sparingly. Like maybe every president gets up to 5. That would be sensible. Like putting some kind of cap on it so that they only could do like 10 in their entire tenure or something.
Now, personally, I would make it a part of the president's emergency powers, where Congress votes that yes, the nation is going through a genuine emergency, and therefore we are granting these powers to the president in order to deal with the matter at hand.
I mean, that would be useful too, but then again, we'd get a Palpatine in there, and everyone who's ever seen the prequels knows what I mean by that.
Yes, I
We
will
we are
give you.
voting emergency powers. He promises he'll give them back. Oh look, he didn't give them back. What? Who could have seen this coming?
Uh, I honestly think Palpatine would do very well in DC.
Palpatine would be Palpatine would have Klaus Schwab, Guy Verhofstadt, and George Soros dancing on the end of a string by the end of like day one. I think.
Until they're no longer useful, and then he would just get rid of them like he did with the separatist
Well,
faction.
I mean, in universe, he actually kind of did that with Masameda. So yeah,
Yeah, but
this has been your regularly scheduled geeky interlude.
let's see. A lot of the orders that Biden signed in his first 100 days were reversals. They were basically, what Biden did. He basically came in and then signed a bunch of orders that reversed a lot of what Donald Trump was doing,
You
which was
activated my trap card and abolished the Trump.
the thing is, at that point, like he was signing so many orders that he threw out a lot of things that were actually good.
Yeah,
I think it's
Because in his mind, the things which we think are good are bad, and the things which we think are bad are probably either good or neutral. So, so he was able
uh,
to just go and be like, "Nuh-uh, those last 4 years were some kind of evil fluke. So we're just gonna undo it."
I love how Biden, when he comes in, they're going to start construction on the wall. 2 years later, we're going to finish the wall in Arizona and Texas. It's just these people can only deny reality so much before reality forces them to respond.
But the thing that frustrates me is it never gets through their heads. Like they they never associate any of this with any sort of framework or principle that makes things make sense. It's always just everything is happenstance. Everything is a case by case basis. A nothing can be fit into some kind of consistent model. Because if they ever put it into any kind of consistent model, they would realize, oh wait, we're our actions are running against what we said, therefore maybe what we said was wrong, question mark. Nope, never that. It's just let's find some other arbitrary reason to do this thing so that we never have to come to grips with the fact that we were ever wrong or mistaken or possibly morally indignant about the wrong thing. And certainly never the people we think are morally invalid are ever correct about anything. No, 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 no. That would be heresy.
Let's see, one of the options was imposing sanctions and diplomatic expulsions on Russia. I wonder if that had any unforeseen consequences.
Well, don't you know, everything is going according to the plan. uh,
Oh god, this is one of the most cringe things I've ever read. One order was to establish a White House Gender Policy Council, which will submit a government wide plan within 200 days with recommendations to advance gender equity and equality in the United States and around the world. So it's not enough that they interfere with our own country, they have to start interfering with everyone else's too.
because they consider countries existing to be a bad thing. They want the one world government and everything because they think that's better. Never mind that that same thinking led to World Wars One and Two, and the Gulf War, and Vietnam, and basically every war, even tangentially related to the 20th century or the 21st, have been a result of somebody going, "Hey guys, let's try to prevent conflict by being a one world bureaucracy." Oh no, it exacerbated the conflict to a ludicrous scale that we've never seen before. Who could have seen this coming? Anyway, I've got to go turn on my light because I just realized I didn't do it before I sat down. So I
All
will
right,
be right back.
I'll wait for you to get back. Yeah, some of these orders are genuinely ridiculous. Let's see, revokes a Trump era proclamation that limited legal immigration during the COVID-19 uh, pandemic. Well, first of all, the Dems were way more worried about the virus than the Republicans were, considering everything that they did to try and push the vaccine. And considering that's the case, you think they would be in favor of limiting the number of people who get in, considering that we would want to check if they're carrying a quote unquote deadly virus. Let's see. Well, this one I'm going to read when Dalton gets back because it's actually pretty interesting.
Okay, there we go. I'm back, and there is light now.
All right, here's what I want to read. He signed an order to revoke a Trump administration order creating an industry-led apprenticeship program. Apprenticeships are actually really good.
Yeah,
Like they allow people to basically learn very useful skills on the job.
yeah.
And I think one of the
They are one of the things that we actually lost in the transition between the Middle Ages and the modern period. And sidebar, but that is one of the cases of history isn't a progression or a regression. It's a case of give and take. And if you actually want to engage with history honestly, the best option is to make sure you keep as much as you can that's good while still making room for improvement where you can.
Yeah, and you think with all the problems that college is having, and all the talk recently about colleges being awful and can leading people into debt, you think that they would want to push apprenticeships because they're a way for people to find a way to get a good career and learn from people who actually have experience and actually get experience themselves while learning. But I don't know why they are pushing college so hard, other than the fact that college is basically an indoctrination center now.
Well, because colleges are for the people who think in the moral abstract. Trades are those filthy practical things that we prefer not to exist. That again, it I know I'm a broken record, but it really does always come back to this. Thinking in the moral abstract and having absolute contempt for anything literal, practical, or straightforward. It really does seem like the root of all of this bullshit.
Let's see. By the way, I'm reading these off of CNN, so please filter through the lens. Let's
Hmm.
see. One revokes Trump's order justifying separating families at the border and creates a task force that recommends steps Biden to reunite separated families. Okay, here's the thing about this one. If someone illegally crosses the border, whether or not they have a child or not, that is a crime. Criminals get sent to jail. But we can't send children to jail. So what do we have to do? We have to send the parent one place because they have broken the law and gets into jail, and the children to another place.
Well, and here's the other half of it, and not your fault, but even just the way you framed it just now, except a false piece of framing. Because here's the thing, they morally fearmongered and they clutched pearls over the separation of families herder. But here's the thing, there is no guarantee that the people that are bringing the children over the border are actually connected to them familially at all.
That's right. That's right. It completely slipped my mind.
And the reason I bring that up is because there's this thing called child trafficking, and there's also this thing whereby if you give birth, or if a person gives birth to another person on American soil, that person who is born is automatically an American. And there are definitely people, cartels, terrorists, etc., who weaponize that provision so that they can stay in a country as a child's caregiver, air quotes, and either engage in human trafficking of some description or just use it as a convenient crowbar to wedge their way into the country. So this whole moral percolating about the separation of families herder excurs the fact that a lot of people actually don't bring their kids with them when they come over because they can't afford to give them a good life yet, and so they want to save it until they can, or because they don't want to subject their child to the um, vagaries of transitioning to a new lifestyle, which seems to me to be a much more sane parental way of thinking than use my children as a human shield to get into the country.
Not only that,
Even in the event that it is actually the parents, which again, human trafficking and terrorism exist.
that's even implying that they make it to America at all, and a lot of people don't. They die in the journey.
Yeah, because sadly enough, it must be said, south of the border, the cartels own fucking everything. We don't know that the Red Court from Dresden Files actually exists, but it wouldn't fucking surprise me with the way that the cartel bureaucracy works down there.
Let's see. So they stopped separation of families. The thing is, what did that do? That basically said, okay, since we can't separate the families, and we can't put the kid in prison with the parent, that means we basically just have to let this person who illegally violated the U.S. borders go.
Bearing in mind that they may not be families at all and are very, very likely to be human traffickers or terrorist organizations, or representatives of the aforementioned cartels. And of course, there is the possibility of all of the above.
All right, here's another executive order that directly affects politicians. Requires non-citizens to be included in the census and appointment of congressional representative.
You know, as much as this pisses me off, and it does, there's a part of me that wants them to lay in the bed they make for themselves, because here's the thing: many people coming from below the border are very traditionalistic and conservative. And only now are particularly the Democrats realizing just how much they may have screwed themselves by thinking, oh, they're poor and brown, so we can convince them to side with our policies because we're being charitable towards them. Oh, not so. A lot of people don't. Sell out their principles that easily.
But the thing is, it's still like on the principle level, it shouldn't be happening because
Yeah,
you know these congressional seats are supposed to represent the citizens who um, who live in that area. That's why they have a certain number so that every citizen can get an equal representation. But like if you include non-citizens, then you're artificially inflating the numbers, and this is it. Also, what they do is a lot of gerrymandering is done as well.
yeah. It's basically the color color palette swapped version of redlining, more or less.
Yeah, and you're basically giving people who are not American citizens and are therefore not entitled to representation in our government of a congressional seat. Not only does it give it a congressional seat, but it also gives it crap. How do we determine who wins the presidential election? Like it's escaping me for some reason.
Voter ID.
Delegates, no delegates.
Hmm.
Yeah, so it determines how many delegates a state has based on population and census. So if they have more um, legal immigration, that will increase the number of uh, that will increase their value in a presidential election.
Which again, there's a part of me that Schadenfreude wants them to do because it will end up backfiring in their faces. Because
I mean,
they think there's some kind of universal human altruism going on, when in actuality what's going to happen is people are going to get in, and then they're immediately going to become self-interested because, well, Ayn Rand was actually right about the intelligentsia, about them being overly altruistic on paper, but in the cold light of reality, when the rubber meets the road, people are self-interested, thankfully.
I mean, uh, things have started to turn around a bit because these people have screwed up their states for a variety of other reasons, and now people are starting to leave. So much so that California has actually seen a population decline for the first
But they
time in
keep the
decades.
policies, is the thing.
Yeah,
They leave the state but keep the policies, and therefore just end up spreading the policies.
which really makes no sense. Like, hey, my politicians did everything I voted for, and now the state sucks.
Well, but see, but again, you have to remember they think in terms of the abstract, not in terms of the literal. So when they see the consequences of their policies, they think to themselves, "Oh, some evil corrupting force must have gotten in the way of executing my policies correctly." And so we just need to try harder and harder to get someone who will put who will put the policies into practice correctly. It couldn't possibly be anything wrong with the policies. It's just the evil, nasty, real world getting in the way of my utopian vision again.
Maybe
Grr.
there should be a rule stating that you don't get to vote in another state's election after you move there for like 3 years.
I I sort of don't think that would solve the problem. I think that I think that would just make I think that would just make the radically minded people fester, and they would spend 3 years becoming more and more irate and therefore more and more radicalized, and then they would vote for even crazier and crazier politicians when it was their turn to vote.
I mean, you look at the state of Portland in California. How much worse could it honestly get?
Can we do Portland without it becoming a thing? Like without it becoming a massive clusterfuck? Because like I was chatting to someone on a dating app the other day, and he actually asked me to come out and meet him, and we'd meet halfway in Portland. And I was just like, there is no force on this earth that would compel me to meet anyone in Portland ever.
Is
I
he
will
aware of
not set foot
Portland?
there.
Is he aware of the current state of Portland?
He wasn't, because I mentioned that Antifa would kill me, and he seemed clueless about the whole thing. Um, and I tried to explain it to him, and how, because I was a YouTuber who had non PC political opinions, they would probably try to pull an Andy No on me if I ever set foot in Portland, and he seemed to think I was being irrationally hysterical and paranoid. Which yeah, no, really not thinking. Like, the only thing that would save me is that people don't know who I am, and the moment people realized who I am, I mean, Andy No is gay and Asian, and that didn't save him. I doubt very much that me being gay, disabled, and a religious minority would save me. It would probably, because in actuality, when the rubber meets the road, these people only care about minorities in the abstract. When they realize it gives them the ability to abuse people, like they care about disability in the abstract, but say a disabled person disagrees with them, they are the first to beat the living shit out of them. And even though most Antifa members are effeminate hipster douchebags, I don't like my odds against an angry mob, and I don't want to die. So yeah, no, I'm avoiding Portland like the plague that it is.
Yeah, I mean that place is basically overrun at this point. Not, I mean, not just with Antifa, but also you have to worry about a potentially dangerous homeless population as well.
I actually have more faith in the homeless because the homeless aren't ideologically motivated to beat me up. Whereas Antifa would see it as a moral good to silence that disabled person who has internalized ableism or some shit.
Yeah, I mean I mean, the homeless could potentially be drug addicted or mentally ill. But, now that I think about it, those labels could also apply to Antifa as well.
I mean, the homelessness at least have an excuse. Life has been shit to them. The Antifa members are middle class to upper middle class hipster twits with trust funds, so they get no empathy from me. Homeless people actually get empathy from me because I know what leads them to that position in a lot of cases, and I mean we've done several instances on men and homeless at this point, so you guys know my opinions on homeless. I have no empathy for hipster twits who advocate for minorities in the abstract, but beat the living shit out of them when the rubber meets the road.
Let's talk about this photo article here. I don't know. Did we talk about the Illinois thing on stream or was that before stream?
I think that was before stream.
All right, let's talk about it. Illinois to force landlords to return illegal immigrants. See, Illinois immigrants will soon be granted housing rights in the state of Illinois after Government J.B. Pritzker, Democrat, signed a bill into law that makes immigration status a protected class. Like, first of all, there should be no protected classes. Think about why would
No,
you give it to people who why would you give it to people who like don't even have the right to be in the country.
Yeah, and as we discussed off air, like on paper I can sort of see this, but here's the problem. There are a couple problems. Number one, you're right, there should be no protected classes. Number two, if you don't consider being housed a right of your citizenry, why in all the fuck would you start by giving it to people who aren't your citizenry on paper? Like, I'm all for solving the homelessness issue. I'm all for seeing housing as some kind of human right because it is on the bottom of Maslow's pyramid of needs. But but if you're going to extend that human rights to people, you probably should start with the millions upon millions of your own citizenry that are homeless rather than the illegal immigrants.
Speaking of, there was actually a situation in New York where they were housing immigrants in hotel rooms, and those hotel rooms got like absolutely trashed, like just destroyed. Like there was even one hotel that was actually going to be shut down because the immigrants who inhabited it did so much damage that it was going to be condemned.
Yeah, it's the same problem as over in across the pond with the Islamic migrants. Probably worse for those over across the pond, because frankly, I would trust I would trust a poor Mexican before I would trust a uh, jihadist, but that's just me. Um, and I don't think there's quite as much ideological invective in south of the border illegal immigrants as there are with Muslims who hate the West. And yes, I'm not saying that all of them hate the West, but then again, not all of the Muslims are coming in illegally either, or being invited, air quotes, by Angela Merkel and Guy Verhofstadt to countries that they don't actually have any jurisdiction over. Uh,
But here's the thing: like with the hotel situation, they were being paid by the government, so at least they were guaranteed, that money. But say you like own like a separate house and you decide to rent it out. If the state of Illinois forces you to house an immigrant and that immigrant, ends up destroying your property, and chances are if they're destroying their property, they're also not paying rent. So like, say you're in that situation, like what's going to happen to you? Are you just now screwed and then I have to pay for that property's repairs out of pocket?
but don't you know, landlords are just the first wave of the petty bourgeois. So they deserve it, don't you know? They are the rich somehow because we say so.
Yeah, just because you own like another house that you can rent doesn't make you rich. I mean, some people, even if they're renting a property, are still just scraping by.
Yeah, it's a side hustle for a lot more people than you would think. But again, the glory of thinking in theory and in the abstract over practical considerations.
Now, I'm actually surprised that this bill even passed, considering that the massive amount of backlash that citizens in Illinois have felt since all the immigrants have been sent to their state, presumably from Texas and Florida, because they just decided to troll the um, the deep blue states by sending them all the immigrants they claim they want.
Martha's Vineyard all of a sudden looks like Mad Max.
That was hilarious. That was one of the greatest things ever.
I like I have my issues with DeSantis, and I genuinely think he was stupid to get in now rather than waiting until 2028. But the man does have at least a little bit of basedness in him.
This article brings up a good point. Breitbart noted that the passing of the bill comes at a hefty price to Americans struggling to find a place to live and at increasing housing costs. So that's another thing. Like, there are people who are trying to find a place to live. You already have to compete with everybody else in the state. Now you also have to compete with the illegal immigrants who are coming from another country. Like that's just going to cause the housing market to rise in cost because now there'll be more people competing for a house.
Yeah, again, calling back to my previous point about the homelessness issue and, housing is a human right thing. If you're gonna do it, you probably should start with the people who are in your country, legally and shite. Because there are so many homeless people that would literally kill for a decent house, and they get Jack Diddley squat. But if said homeless person comes from across the border without going through the proper channels, mind you, they get bumped to the front of the line because that's how that works. Apparently,
That's
you're an actual American citizen who happens to be white or other ethnicity, then you get fucked. But if you come across the border and you're homeless, then we will get right on that as long as you don't go through the official channels. Uh,
there's a senator from Ohio, Senator Vance, who says, "Think about what this does for housing prices when you have to house 10 million people that shouldn't be here. By driving up the cost of housing when interest rates are already through the roof. This is economic warfare and theft of the American dream from American citizens. That is a big problem here, and that's why we have to keep fighting it. Like, the economy is not in a good place, and everything costs more than it should. So to have this like artificial inflating of housing prices by bringing in 10 million people is it's just going to make lives worse for the actual citizens of Illinois.
does anyone remember the 2008 housing bubble? I remember. Do you think this is going to help the problem, or do you think we're about to do second verse same as the first, only worse?
Also, here's the thing: if the illegal immigrants actually get houses, like because of because of their very presence, like the cost of it is going to go up, and given their status as an illegal immigrant, like are they going to be able to find sufficient work to keep up the rent payments?
Also, not for nothing, but how do you think privileging illegal immigrants is going to make people in those communities who aren't illegal immigrants feel? Because I genuinely believe racism is bad and all, but when you're actually privileging one race over another, and especially the members of that race that are doing things illegally and are too poor to um, maintain their own living standards for themselves, how exactly do you think that makes that race look to people whose only exposure to people of that race are whoever they meet in their real lives? I'm not saying it's some kind of helter skelter conspiracy and they're doing this on purpose. I just think that this is one of those areas where this kind of incompetence and only thinking in the abstract is going to really bite you in the ass when your apocalyptic racist prophecy comes to fruition by your own incompetence rather than any actual truth value to it.
All right, everybody, I am going to end the stream here. I have been Mystery.
I have been Dalton Mortimer, the Authenticator. We have been the Duality of Man. Fuck politicians, ladies and gentlemen. Fuck them. Except for like 5 of them in America, and I don't even know in other countries. I hear Kemi Vadendock is pretty good across the pond.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Cheers, guys.